Here up top. Okay, you got the Jackie Youngs, the Kelsey Mitchells. That's the Louis Vuitton store. We're replacing Kelsey. We're not replacing it with another Louis V item. Okay, we're not going quite to the bottom.
If the Indiana Fever commit to this move, they risk slamming their own championship window shut. There's a powerful financial illusion distorting how much of the WNBA audience is in this situation. Casual observers look at the Indiana Fever roster and instinctively push for emotional continuity, urging the front office to hand Kelsey Mitchell a $1.4 million supermax deal. On the surface, her 20 points per game feel indispensable, creating the impression that losing her would be a fatal blow. But that assumption collapses under real salary cap scrutiny. In a hard cap system, allocating roughly 20% of total payroll to a high-usage, isolation-heavy scorer can severely limit roster flexibility, especially if that scoring doesn't translate into elite efficiency or scalable team offense. The decision isn't about sentiment, it's about resource allocation. Overcommitting to one player archetype risks locking the franchise into a structurally imbalanced roster, reducing their ability to build a dynamic, high-efficiency system around their primary engine and long-term competitive vision.
Some options that we can put together. We can piece together 2 to 3 quality pieces to replace Kelsey Mitchell. She's going to command $1.4 million. I believe the Indiana Fever.
Focus on the underlying logic here. This is a warning about roster fragility disguised as a financial decision. If the Indiana Fever allocate a supermax slot to Kelsey Mitchell, they're not just paying for scoring. They're sacrificing the flexibility needed to sustain defensive depth and lineup balance. That kind of cap commitment makes it significantly harder to retain high-impact role players like Lexa Hull or add physical, tone-setting pieces like Sophie Cunningham. The result is a top-heavy roster that looks strong on paper but becomes vulnerable over the course of a long, demanding season. A disciplined front office doesn't try to replace 20 points per game with another single scorer at the same price point. Instead, they distribute that production across multiple efficient contributors, players who defend, move the ball, and elevate overall team function. This is a principle of aggregate efficiency, spreading resources across complementary skill sets to maximize total output. It's less glamorous than a headline signing, but far more sustainable. The challenge, and the opportunity, is navigating free agency with that mindset, identifying undervalued pieces that collectively replicate and even exceed the impact of one high-cost player.
People here up top. Okay, you got the Jackie Youngs, the Kelsey Mitchells. That's the Louis Vuitton store. We're replacing Kelsey. We're not replacing it with another Louis V item. Okay, we're not going quite to the bottom.
Lean into the logic of that retail analogy. Losing a max-tier asset doesn't mean you immediately replace it with another max-tier contract. If the Indiana Fever move on from Kelsey Mitchell, the objective isn't to panic spend on another headline name like Jackie Young, nor is it to swing to the opposite extreme and fill the roster with low-impact, minimum salary flyers. The optimal path sits in the middle, targeting undervalued, high-fit contributors who collectively raise a team's efficiency. When you scan the upper tier, players like Ariel Atkins and Gabby Williams stand out immediately. Both are proven, high-level two-way contributors. Atkins is a premier perimeter scorer and defender. Williams is a versatile, disruptive force with elite defensive instincts. But that level of impact commands a significant portion of the cap. Investing heavily in one of them improves the starting lineup, yet it constrains overall roster depth, especially under a longer, more physically demanding schedule. That's why the smarter strategy shifts toward the league's middle class, players whose specific skill sets align perfectly with a fast-paced, transition-oriented system. Instead of concentrating resources into one or two expensive names, the goal becomes assembling a layered rotation of defenders, secondary playmakers, and efficient off-ball scorers. This is where true roster optimization happens, identifying pieces that amplify pace, spacing, and defensive versatility around your primary engine. That segment of the market, deep, often overlooked, and cost-efficient, is where the real competitive advantage lies heading into free agency.
Probably going to be about half of that based on this, so you could get a Bridget Carlton from in the $600K range, okay? You could probably get Bridget Carlton for the $550, $600K. You probably can land a Bridget Carlton if she's...
Focus on the actual value mechanics here. This is about fit, efficiency, and asset optimization, not headline production. A player like Bridget Carlton represents a near-perfect tactical complement to Caitlin Clark. She brings size, defensive reliability, and, most importantly, low usage, high efficiency offense. Her game doesn't require isolation touches or high volume. It thrives on spacing, timing, and decision-making. In a system driven by pace and gravity, she becomes a force multiplier, converting open looks created by Clark while stabilizing the perimeter defensively. If you can secure that profile at a mid-tier salary, you're effectively upgrading efficiency while preserving cap flexibility. The next layer of the strategy targets undervalued athletic upside. Burrell fits this mold as a transition-oriented wing whose market value is suppressed by inconsistent usage and context. In a faster, more structured offensive environment, her speed and length become far more impactful. She doesn't need to be a primary creator. Her value comes from running the floor, finishing in space, and adding defensive range. That's exactly the kind of scalable skill set that pairs well with an elite playmaker. With those two pieces in place, the remaining cap space can be allocated toward interior mobility and depth. Adding a rim-running, high-energy forward like Letitia Amy here or proven rotational presence such as Temi Fagbenle rounds out the structure. Both profiles bring rebounding, transition finishing, and defensive activity, key components for sustaining a high-tempo system over a full season. This is where the strategy fully comes together. Instead of concentrating resources into one expensive scorer like Kelsey Mitchell, you distribute that same capital across multiple complementary players. The result is a deeper, faster, more defensively stable roster that maximizes the strengths of its primary engine while minimizing structural weaknesses.
Ariel Atkins and a Bridget Carlton, or a Bridget Carlton, Burrell, and a Temi Fagbenle, 3 for the price of 1 of Kelsey Mitchell. I think you have to look at these things, and I believe it's a move that the Indiana Fever need to look to.
Focus on the underlying value mechanics. This is about fit, efficiency, and smart asset allocation, not chasing headline scoring totals. A player like Bridget Carlton is an ideal complement to Caitlin Clark because she delivers size, defensive discipline, and low usage efficiency. She doesn't need the ball to be effective. Her impact comes from spacing the floor, making quick decisions, and converting high-quality looks generated by Clark's playmaking gravity. That kind of profile quietly elevates both ends of the floor while keeping the salary structure flexible. The next step is targeting undervalued athletic upside, which is where Burrell becomes extremely intriguing. Her current market value is dampened by inconsistent opportunities, but her speed, length, and transition ability make her a natural fit in an up-tempo system. Paired with an elite facilitator, her role simplifies: sprint the floor, finish in space, and defend with range. In the right environment, that archetype scales efficiently without demanding heavy usage. With those pieces in place, the remaining cap space can be used to strengthen the interior rotation. Adding a mobile, rim-running forward like Letitia Amy here or a proven, high-energy contributor such as Temi Fagbenle provides rebounding, defensive activity, and transition finishing, essential traits for maintaining pace and physicality over a full season. This is where the strategy crystallizes. Rather than allocating a massive share of the cap to a single scorer like Kelsey Mitchell, you spread those resources across multiple complementary players. The end result is a deeper, more versatile, and defensively resilient roster, one that fully amplifies its primary playmaker while avoiding the structural limitations of a top-heavy build.